Yep. Alright, Victor Games Cold War. Oh, this one and its progenitor in terms of system and designers, Spies, both leave me kind of feeling a little cold. No matter how I play them, opposed Solitaire, it doesn't matter. Solitaire, they both have a problem. Hidden information, a lot of interactive play. That doesn't tend to work well solo. But even opposed, I always find myself just not all that into it. It's sort of it's almost a bridge, the system in both games, between what later became, I guess, more modern design techniques. And you see Euros with similar kinds of flavors to it. It's an innovative system. It's exciting to play at times where you're, oh, can I counter what he's got on me? Not really Euro. There was an interesting period, and it wasn't just this SPI, Victory Games stuff, but you saw fantasy games, things like Pentacle, sort of predecessors to Magic, predecessors to the card-driven or card-assisted stuff. Upfront is another example. There was a lot of innovation going on throughout the hobby to try to find something to hook into more kind of interactive play, less of that, I'm going to wait 20 minutes for you to finish your turn. Great. Well, for someone like me, you're going to wait 20 minutes for me to figure out how to play a fucking card, which card to play. So that doesn't help much, but for normal people, I think it works. That kind of play was something we were reaching towards as a hobby as a whole, and not just the wargaming side of things, which this isn't even qualifying, but it comes from wargaming pedigree and companies at least. Out of the two games, I would say Spies is the stronger game, notwithstanding the fact that the action cards are such an improvement over the stupid action chits in Spies. Because in Spies, you have to look at your chit, you have to look it up in the sheet to see what it does. Now, you gotta look it up here too, but that's okay. There's a lot of player aids in this box, more than you need. Spies had a problem where there's like one sheet that everybody's sharing. You could photocopy that or whatever, and you really should. Because at least a couple people need to be able to reference it at the same time. The two people attacking and defending in a given situation. The problem with this in comparison to Spies is that this one reinforces turtling even more. That's probably the biggest issue, is that you've got, well, in terms of gameplay, in terms of historicity, it has another big problem. It doesn't fit any time period. Like, it is not, and it's kind of specifically not, it is not the immediate post-World War II era. It's not any period during the Cold War. It's not the 1980s situation. Nor is it generic enough, which it could be if you allowed people to place the special interest counters wherever the hell they liked. But the fact that, like, China's special interest counter could be in Taiwan, which almost guarantees that China will have pieces starting the game in Taiwan. I guess it's possible that the US could throw their shit right in there and go for a body blow on China right at the beginning of the game. But man, that's kind of weird, and it's not just Taiwan. The other places where they can end up are also equally kind of weird. Just in terms of sort of the idea of preset, the power is here. So the only thing that can really be said to be is, I don't know, this came out maybe 82, 83, whatever, is maybe it was like some projected, this is what the world is going to be like in 1990, which kind of makes sense because you have the Western Europeans who don't really have that kind of cohesiveness politically, even now, and you have China exerting more influence globally than they did in any historical period, including the point at which the game was written. Judged on that, okay, but that's kind of saying the U.S. is going to squander their pretty big advantage, and the Soviets also, although they kind of did by that point. So, and somehow China and Europe are going to, dominate in the same kind of level that this bipolar world did. Russia and the U.S. kind of did. So, it's an interesting postulate. So then, okay, so it's a fantasy game or a hypothetical situation set in the future, whatever you want to call that. And given that, well, that kind of waters it down a little bit in terms of interest for me. A hypothetical based on a time period that never actually occurred and that's past. The USSR doesn't exist anymore. It's coming back. Okay. But it's our ally now. Anyway. So you're dealing in a fantasy type, hypothetical situation that other geopolitical Cold War-ish games did. Summit is the most notable of all, with Africa and South America as major powers in the game, along with the 4 that are here. But in terms of gameplay, the real problem is your best move is not to get in a fight with anybody, and to kind of not necessarily keep a low profile, because everybody could be doing just about as well. Everybody looks fine, and somebody decides to test out the combat system. Thanks, Mark. And, hey, Cold War often, flared up to conflicts, right? Well, you start pressing conflict in this game, and everyone who's not involved in it kind of gets a benefit. Now, that's not to say that you can't defend yourself if you're in a conflict. If you decide to be passive and receive a conflict that's coming at you, well, that's going to benefit the guy who conflicts you, and it's going to hose you. So basically, the 2 or more powers that get involved in the conflict are going to get into an ugly struggle. And the one thing that kind of might incite some conflict, although it usually doesn't in most games that I've played, at least not of any value, is the Middle East. If somebody goes for the Middle East, well, everybody just beats them down. And we actually saw that in this game. The U.S. tried to inject themselves in there, and that caused them to be public enemy #1, and caused a couple of conflicts to arise for them and left them in a position they would never recover from in the entirety of the game. That's definitely a facet in the game. You get knocked down, not only is it hard for you to get back on your feet because you don't have the points to spend to do stuff, and you'll always be behind, unless other people start getting in conflicts, but you also, there we go. You also might end up finding yourself owing money to someone each turn because you lost in that conflict partially. If you end up, now beyond that, you also end up so weak in points that you can't defend yourself properly. So you actually become carrion that other people pick off. And China got a lot of points off of picking off a U.S. Key interest in the game that I played. Ideally, everyone else should have gone for one as well, just to keep the balance of power there. But China wasn't doing terribly well, so they were willing to pass on that because the U.S. still has some capability to fight back, right? And it's expensive to go in militarily. In fact, China fell behind in part because they went after the U.S. militarily and picked off one of their things because of the high expense of military after the initial startup. At the beginning of the game, military is not that bad. You just pay 5 and you can drop it in a place immediately. But from then on, it's going to cost you 10 to put it somewhere. The one exception being into your home country. You can deploy it into your home country for free. So that's, Russia can go into Yugoslavia, North America can go into Central America. There's a few little places where people have a capacity to influence something that maybe they're interested in. But it's not a very heavy capacity. They're not going to control that way. They're just going to be able to degrade someone else's position. There's a lot of cards that I don't use much. Things like insurgencies and stuff like that. If you want to pick on someone, sure, but you're not gaining anything out of it. So if someone's a clear leader, you can kind of pick on them that way. But again, the cost is high because it requires a military. Instability is not so bad. You saw some of them fired off. Coups, man, they're hard. I mean, you have to get yourself so you are allowed to put your military in there. And then once you do that, you have to then pay at a high cost to kick off a coup action. And the way the action cards work, well, if you're putting a high initial bid on that, now you're very committed, and you would better have a handful of stuff that helps your offense. It's kind of weird. A handful of offense isn't necessarily clear because, like, things that counter double crosses might be part of your offense. Some of the others, things that counter security, things that counter I don't know. Things that counter double crosses. Yeah. There's certain things that allow you a fair amount of flexibility. There's also different flavors of different cards. So, like, it's not like a Down in Flames type game where, oh, a barrel roll will always counter this. No, it's some securities will counter some, will counter coups. Some will do instability. I don't know about instability, but insurrection. Maybe instability as well. So you have, like, not, a simple set of cards. You have a fairly complex number of cards. You have the same thing in Spies, by the way, but it's all on chits. So you'll have, like, the equivalent of this would be you'll have, like a double cross A that only affects certain cards, or certain other chits, or something like that. And boy, is that a complicated and a painful system. So components-wise, Spies just has a real problem. And I would suggest if you're going to play that, think about making your own cards. It's not that hard these days. You can even send them out to, like, GameCrafter or something and get a pretty good set of them without having to pay a fortune in terms of startup equipment to do-it-yourself projects. I don't know what their copyright situation is, whether they'll do it that way. But yeah, like Kinko's and stuff will do stuff too. Maybe if you can get away with it the right way, you may have to photocopy it and make it look like it's not, copyrighted material. I mean, it's not like the cards say anything copyrighted on them, but okay. So that's one of the big problems between this and Spies. Now, Spies also has the other big problem with this is that it's all open information. So you can calculate exactly where you are in the victory situation. And that can lead to more expensive turns. I would suggest if you're going to play this, play it with a time limit on the per turn basis so that people can't calculate. Or if they can, they have to do it very quickly. The disadvantage with that, of course, is, well, you feel like, well, that information's open. I should be able to figure out, what's best, what's not. Well, take the downtime between turns to calculate out what's going on and who you need to hit. Although your cards can sometimes direct who you need to hit because of moles, because moles are incredibly powerful. All right. Spies isn't perfect, though, in this nature either, at least in the turtling side of things. It's pretty good in the hidden information side because the secrets that you're trying to grab are all hidden. And unless somebody's touched that secret, they don't know who has it, Things get pretty confusing in that. It's a harder game to solo, though, because of that. But it also has this, whoever kind of keeps the lowest profile and doesn't look like the winner is the person who's going to win. That's true in a lot of Euros, too, at least the ones where you have influence on other people's actions. Played a couple of them yesterday. Azul, which is a new kind of one where it's total abstract, but you have a lot of dickiness capability in it. And Build Me a Planet, a Little Prince thing, also had a lot of capability to, like, well, at least some capability to screw over specific opponents, so you can kind of target people who you think are doing well or whatever. And I guess in both of those, it wasn't always apparent who's doing the best at any given time. It can be, especially in Azeroth. That seems pretty open as to what you want to target. But anyway, there are plenty of games where you can dick people over, where History of the World is one of them, where you might be padding points that aren't apparent. They're not being kept on the score track. They haven't been scored yet, but they're gonna be scored, and they're gonna be big. And you know, that's kind of a neat facet to games, but it's also kind of frustrating to find that the game's goal is basically to hide how well you're doing, as opposed to anything else. I don't know. This one, and especially Spies, that's a major part of it. This never did as much for me as I had hoped to. Spies never did as much for me as I would hope to. They seem like cool systems, but when it actually comes down to it, maybe they're a little too Euro-y, maybe they're a little too modern to design, even for their age. That interactive play, I don't really like it. I don't like the pre-planning of which cards to hold terribly well. You know, there's just a lot of stuff in this that doesn't turn me on. But I can respect a lot of this stuff too. In either case, both are fairly decent games, as it were. It's just this one has a little bit more, a few more things that irk me. It's also kind of, they both have a significant amount of randomness too. I mean, this one has the randomness of, oh look, I just got bonused into an extra income. That's either more victory points or, more importantly, because you can kind of snowball things. If it happens early in the game, it can be, a serious jump ahead. Of course, if it happens early in the game, other players can counter it. If it happens late in the game, it could just be the game, determined by the draw of a card. Which doesn't terribly upset me, I guess, but somehow it bugs me more in a game like this. For the topic, I prefer Summit to this. And obviously, if you're willing to go to non-multiplayer, multipolar power situation, Twilight Struggle is far, far better, both being more historically based and also just a much better game. But, it's interesting to see things like this. It's not something I'd ever push to get played again. If people came to my house to game, it would probably get played. But it's not something I'm going to carry somewhere to play. But I might suggest it just as we got 4 players and, I don't know, it's like a couple hours or something. In a couple hours, let's do this, And then I'll be miserable and say, wow, I remember why I don't like this game. All right, let's send it up.